Morning, guys. It's practically almost 5 o'clock in the morning. Should have back to bed sleep. I couldn't sleep much. What else I couldn't take is waking up to seeing spiders in the morning, especially black widows. That's all I need for them to do is come on inside the house. I mean, they're welcome to the damn bugs, but they're not welcome into the house. Someone was talking about an article where some 12-year-olds couldn't even identify what type of computer disk that they had in their hands. I know I'm looking at my phone right now. Give me one quick second. I gotta show something to you. Sorry, I just had to clear out the old throat. KTLA this morning. You had Megan Henderson and Chris Schaubel, Carlos Herrera, talking about the old days of computers. Carlos, I hate to say it, he is way too young to remember this stuff. He is in his 30s. He'll remember maybe the stick drives, and maybe he'll remember the square cartridges. But upon doing a search on internet, doing a Google search, I'll show you something. Okay, see that? This is off of Google, okay? You recognize it? Any of it? Maybe half of it or some of it? The stuff that we've been using these days. Well, this is probably going over to those both to Megan and Chris for their constant chattering about this one on their casual program that they have that I don't even get access to in the first place. I'm so damn old as I remember the disk drives that they actually had for small companies. Big, huge, round, honking discs that you would have to place in there. And they have less storage than anything else these days. Hang on one second. Sorry about that. They're up the ultra-rust. That's what happens when you got breathing issues. They were putting me back in a time where I remember using these damn things. My mother used to work for a letter-making company. It's been around, had been around for decades. They used to create weapons of war for World War II and reconditioned for letter making. It's called West On Letters. It was on North La Brea, out of West Hollywood. This building had history, including the owner, which was a World War II veteran, Rare Weston. He gave my mother a job concerning about bookkeeping and accounting work, and accounting controller. And I remember seeing my first major computer to work with. The damn thing scared the daylights out of me. I was afraid of screwing up the company, hitting the wrong button, getting all the damn data screwed up. Everything had to be accurate. Everything had to be accurate. And I also remembered going through high school, taking computer literacy classes and then taking computer programming classes. I wasn't very good at programming because it was dealing with logic. You're dealing with the programming of BASIC. BASIC was a logical step. Had about 70 lines, but then they're like every line of code was in its 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. If this and that, if that, I don't know. It would do actions necessary. And I came across that while being presented at Commodore 64. Very expensive computers back then. I don't even know how the hell my mother would be able to afford that damn thing. She must have been making payments on this thing. 64K. Back in the 80s, that was a big thing when it comes down to the personal computer. Then again, you had the tape drives. Magnetic cassettes looked like things you could put into your cassette recorder. That's basically what it was. It was a cassette recorder that you hooked up. Others actually had the square floppies hook into them. Not the bigger floppies, but the squares. So back, let me show you something. What I remembered. The one that looks like the big flat black thing on the other side. Well, that little notch in the middle of it, down below, white strip on top of it. That is what we used in computer classes. We did not use the hard copy, a hard disk, just yet. Not until we came out with those damn things about a year or two later. For the most part, those big floppies were the ones we used back in the 80s. And then in the late 80s, early 90s, that's where the hard disk came out. And then a little bit later, you had the CDs coming out for the storage. This is the kind of stuff that we used for saving our data on. They were expensive. For those who are on a budget, the drives themselves were expensive. The discs were cheap, manufactured that way. And if you're a total geek, you know which particular stores, major chains to go through, such as Egghead, CompUSA. Egghead was the primary software company to go through because they had all the software that you needed, both for your office work and your personal and doing word processing, and not to mention the gaming as well. And CompUSA was dealing with the equipment, not to mention all the software as well, and the peripherals that was needed for it. It was a shame that CompUSA faded like every other computer company out there that I've seen that was catering to it. Now you got the big chains trying to do it. It's just not the same because you don't get the personal attention or satisfaction. Fry's tried to do it for a hell of a long while, but they didn't exactly do very well with these guys. But I remember going to places like that and getting software to play in the games. There was other computer shops. Excuse me 1 second. There were also specialized computer shops out there that dealt with the small businesses out there called DAC Industries. We got our first major personal computer at home so my mother could do her bookkeeping and income taxes when she started her business back in mid to late 80s. They were located in a hole-in-the-wall area of Woodland Hills, Warner Center area. And a lot of people, a lot of geeks were over there. They loved the equipment that they had over there. They had these headsets. Looked like motorcycle headsets. Swing down boom arm that you could use for radios and stuff. I thought that was the coolest damn thing. I looked at the magazines that they had, catalogs and rules. I couldn't help it. I'm a geek. These days, well, the ones that actually would come down and 10, 15, maybe 20 if you're lucky enough. The Logitechs I know about. They're decent headsets. Bit rubber and a microphone in. There's padding here. But they would hold securely in your head. And then again, these days we're dealing with earbuds all the time. Stick them in your ears and you only maybe have about an hour or two left of life in those damn things before you burn them up. People use them like crazy to listen to the music or communications or whatever they can do. Well, I know the old cliches of saying that the computers have come away in a long time. I know that cliche has been out there, God knows how long. But these networks You got to understand about computers these days. They've grown so much since the days of the big, huge vacuums and super-cooled environmental units that had to be running 24/7 to keep the AC going in order to keep the computer equipment cooled down. You really had to be living in Antarctic to keep those monsters from overheating and burning out. My mother, thank God, didn't work in that kind of environment. But she did work in an environment where they actually had computer punch cards. Pieces of cardboard, flat, with holes on them. Stack them up. Put them in a machine. The machine would read them as binary language. This would tell the computer what to do at this point over here. Basically, you're telling it what to do. Second. Computers had gotten so more sophisticated these days that we never even realized that some of the earlier beginnings, our parents and our grandparents actually worked with them. Actually, our grandparents and great-grandparents. If they were actually geeks and nerds during that time. If they actually had mathematical aptitude, they'd be able to work in environments like that. It was not made for the typical office clerk these days. You actually had some kind of training of some sort for it. Not a doctorate, but an understanding. And sometimes actually did need a little bit of manual, but you really had to know what the hell you were doing. My mother was not a college graduate, but she had a sharp enough mind that would put him to shame. Things happened in her past that prevented her from going on in education history, in her academia. Life happens and you have to deal with it, regardless of whatever happens. But my mother had made it into a thing for me to go into college. Screwed up after high school and had to go into the workforce. I had rudimentary keyboard knowledge. Oh, sure, I took the computer typing courses at school, didn't I? We didn't have computer typing courses, what am I saying? We had manual typing courses, big, huge monstrosities. We had big, huge manual monsters that killed your fingers every single day. My speed sucked. Still. When you got into the electronic, you really had to be this way, and a lot faster. And I had to be tested a great deal to make sure I know where my keyboards were, where the keys were all the time. So yeah, there was programming back then of how to test you out regarding your speed, and I got tested pretty damn much. A great deal, in fact, especially when I was working temp. I had to make sure my speed was up to par. I had to make sure that I knew how to work with the keyboard without looking for all the damn keys. Once I knew where the keys were and what their special functions were, it was automatic. Computers had changed a great deal since I grew up. I never knew what a computer was. All I know that there was a computer in the form of a wristband watch. Storage was on board an Apollo spacecraft. All the instructions crammed into a drive that storage wipes would be put into a damn digital watch. Back then, that was a lot. Back in the 60s, that was a great deal. I heard stories about that, and I read stories about that. Wow. Stacks and stacks of papers and cards just to get the computer to run the Apollo spacecraft to the moon and back. And we take it for granted what we've got on our smartphones. We have gigabytes. If we're lucky enough, we got terabytes of these damn things. You shove a terabyte card, and we're off to the races. And it's It throws me off. It really does. I'm hoping maybe that the youth can appreciate what they have these days, because the older generation, even the generations before mine, were basically pioneers of what we're dealing with today. If my mother knew how to use a smartphone, it'd freak her out. Using a laptop was hard enough for her in her final days, her final years. She had to call me up for computer tech support all the time. Johnny! Where's my Johnny on the spot? Coming, Ma. Even when she was running her bookkeeping income tax business, I had to do all the data entry for her. When I had faster fingers, 120, 150, sometimes 170 if I was lucky enough to burn them up. These days, I'm lucky if I could do this on a keyboard. 55. I mean, I've seen other people actually were able to get the speed out of these things by going to the keyboard and go. I used to have nimble wrists where I could go into an arcade and kick ass. I get my ass kicked too many times from my mother. This is what happens when you raid her piggy bank too many times. And I happened to do Susan B. Anthony's for quarters. Yeah. But enough of that. I wanted to give you guys a sense of where I grew up with technology-wise. I'd seen cameras change a great deal to the cameras we've got these days. It's amazing how our technology has increased, but unfortunately our common sense and anything else, and then everything else hasn't changed much. And when I saw that story on KTLH, I was like, oh, considering my 12-year-olds didn't even know what a damn floppy is, it didn't surprise me a bit. It did not surprise me a bit. Because there's no way in hell they were teaching computer literacy or computer history during those courses. They had no idea what computers were like during that time. Or even what the computers were like back in the 1940s. Neither had I. I understand what vacuum tubes are, since I grew up in the era where televisions had vacuum tubes. Like computer punch cards, never heard of it. Until I actually saw one machine in operation. I'm like, what the hell is this? My mother told me. It's a punch card. I'm like, what the hell is that? So yeah, I'm feeling my age these days. I see the advancement of technology. I've seen science fiction talking about how technology has changed so much. They have in the books, they have in the media left and right, trying to show us and demonstrate what's, how things are going these days. And right now, I feel old. 55-year-olds not supposed to feel this old, but when it comes down to the youngsters and their knowledge of what the computer basis is for their time, compared to what my time was, yeah, I feel the old. I feel the age difference. It's not, take it easy, Gramps. No, it's like I grew up under a different era than these other kids did. I understood what peripheral cords were. Coaxial cables. Of course, we still use coaxial cables these days. Computer printout cables. I didn't realize what the hell those damn things were until I actually saw them in operation. What a data bus flow was. Open up a computer and see the innards of it. See what the damn CPU and the storage was. Let alone the plug-and-play cards that you put in there, including phone modems and sound boards, joystick boards. How to change the BIOS. Yeah, I learned how to do that a long time ago. It wasn't easy. I had to make sure that the computers are running right for my mother. Of course, being a 20-something stock-year-old kid, supposed to learn something about the computer technology, the innards. They did have books back then about how to work with computers, what they looked like, and I had to look at the computer manuals. Big, huge, thick, multi-ringed monstrosities, card-shaped. Oh God, those things are a pain in the ass to work with. Instruction booklets to work with word processing and spreadsheets and accounting programs. You try working with a book this thick on how to use Peachtree Accounting or TurboTax back in the days. And I had to memorize that damn thing and work with them. Or learn on the fly and die trying. But because they had the Windows-based programs out there, we finally actually had Mises and Mooches and Houses. We had these things corded. Not the Wi-Fi. Not the mechanisms that are in here that you could plug right into the USB port. No, they were corded. Some of these mouses actually had cords that were either square or rounded, that you would plug right in the back or into the front. Sometimes they were color-coded. The front of the computer would probably tell you which particular color code that you need for your peripheral that you're plugging into. Headsets, phone cords sometimes. On some computers, they would have the connections in the back, and others would have it in the front. Take off the cover plate, put your equipment in there, and you just plug it right in the front. It'd be a lot easier than in the back. Of course, you have to have a lot of airflow in the back because the computers still need a lot of air to circulate to cool the machines down. And it still is a machine. There are operating procedures, there are operating things that happen. And they do require power and they do heat up. The laptop I'm working with, I have a cooling tray underneath that has a couple fans circulating the heat away. But imagine having computers like that constantly in a larger environment. And you would have to deal with 60-degree temperatures inside while the computers are overheating left and right because we're using them 24/7. A lot of power usage. I had to work in a couple of temp jobs that way. Dealt with the aerospace industry. And they had rooms like that where they needed a constant airflow to deal with the computers, the terminals basically. First day I go into computer literacy class, I got a geek for computer teacher. He's about late 40s, looks like he's been through the ringer. And basically, he's teaching us the basics of computers because he knows computer languages. He's been through Fortran, Pascal, BASIC, and several others. He'd been in the computer industry when it was coming out. He worked on the big monsters. So he's teaching us, during that time, he's teaching us youngsters about what the computers were like. Anything and everything concerning about the mechanism of it and the histories of the computer. And then the next term is trying to deal with computer programming 101, trying to give people a refresher course. One thing I noticed that old Kaufman didn't have is a sense of humor. Damn near got thrown out of class because I made a smart-ass remark about this one. So, yeah, I learned this one last class. Trying to get the hell out of here. That's what we were. Get out of here. Shut up. Okay. Didn't want to cause any more waves, so let's shut up rather than tie us Mr. I wasn't very good at programming. It required a certain logical mind. The program that they had was pretty much basic. And it was called BASIC. Logic and algebra to me never worked in the first place. Thinking back in those days, it just made me feel old again. And thinking about how different things were back compared to now in the computers. We looked at the small drives that we can fit into a small slot. A small tiny chip. No bigger than what my spaces are in the fingers. I could slide right into here and it would hold as much data as my laptop will hold. Once I'm actually able to afford something of that kind of a gig, or almost to a terabyte. We didn't hear anything about terabytes growing up. Bits and bytes, yeah. Kilobytes, okay. Megabytes, wow. We're getting there. Gigabytes, what the hell is that? Terabytes, ah! I'm not intimidated with these things. I'm not intimidated with a keyboard. And as long as they got the GUI, the graphic user interface devices, wireless mouses, or even the touchpads. They even had eraser heads a long time ago, right in the middle of a keyboard. Difficult to work with. The touchpads were a hell of a lot easier to work with. Just glide your finger right across the damn thing. Always a lot easier when you got yourself a mouse, wireless. Once it picks up the frequency of the laptop and you're off and running, I can actually run my arrow right around my face as I'm trying to do this. I could do other operations while doing video. But it makes me feel too damn old while I'm doing this. Because I was reminded of how much a 12-year-old didn't understand anything that he's been dealing with right now as it is. Wait until he gets older and he's able to understand history and appreciate it more and more. I hope so. Because wait until he understands more and more about the history he's living through right now. My history would be a hell of a lot different than